Inside the Murdaugh case, power, lies, and the fall of a Southern dynasty. It was a quiet night on June 7, 2021, in the small town of Islandton, South Carolina. The crickets sang in the warm summer air, and the Murdaugh family's grand estate, known locally as Moselle, sat still under the moonlight. But inside the property's vast hunting grounds, a horrifying scene was about to unfold. At around 10 p.m., a frantic 911 call shattered the calm. "My wife and my son have been shot badly. Please hurry," the voice cried. The caller was Alex Murdaugh, a well-known lawyer from one of the most powerful families in South Carolina's Lowcountry. His tone was panicked, breaking, almost unbelieving, as if his world had just collapsed. When police arrived, they found a shocking sight. On the ground near the dog kennels lay Paul Murdaugh, Alex's 22-year-old son. A few feet away was Maggie Murdaugh, his wife of nearly 3 decades. Both were dead. The area was silent except for the flashing blue lights bouncing off the trees. The officers noticed something strange. Despite the horror of the scene, Alex seemed both devastated and controlled. He talked fast, gave details, and yet something about his story didn't feel right. He claimed he had just arrived home and found them this way. But as detectives looked closer, they began to sense this was not just a random attack. Before the night was over, the Murdaugh name, once respected, powerful, untouchable, would forever become linked with scandal, secrets, and lies. But who were the Murdaughs? To understand the shock this crime caused, you have to understand the power this family once had. For more than 100 years, the Murdaughs ruled the legal world in the South Carolina Lowcountry. 3 generations of Murdaugh men had served as top prosecutors, known as solicitors in the region. They were the law. They helped convict criminals, built influence, and made connections that ran deep into every corner of the state. Everyone in the area knew them. Everyone respected, and sometimes feared them. Alex Murdaugh followed that legacy. He worked as a personal injury lawyer at his family's firm, winning large settlements and living a life of luxury. The family owns several homes, expensive cars, and the vast 1,700-acre Moselle property where the tragedy took place. But beneath the charm and Southern respectability, dark things were happening. Secrets that would soon destroy everything. Just 2 years before the murders, the Murdaughs were already in the headlines for another reason. In 2019, Paul Murdaugh, the younger son, had been involved in a deadly boat crash. Late one night, while out with friends, Paul was driving the family's boat, allegedly drunk, when it slammed into a bridge. A young woman named Mallory Beach, just 19 years old, was thrown into the water and never came back alive. The community was outraged. Many believed Paul's family would use their power to protect him, and they did. Though he was charged, the legal process moved slowly, and Paul remained free while awaiting trial. The public whispered that the Murdaughs were above the law. Now, just 2 years later, Paul was dead, shot at the very home that was supposed to keep him safe. Detectives immediately began piecing things together. There were no signs of forced entry. Nothing appeared stolen. Whoever did this seemed to know the property. And strangely, Alex, the father, said he had been visiting his elderly mother at the time of the shootings. But the timing of his trip and his return raised questions. The Murdaugh name was suddenly everywhere, in newspapers, on TV, on social media. People across America began asking, how could such a powerful family end up here?
Over the next few days, investigators searched every inch of Moselle. They found shell casings near the kennels, and ballistics suggested 2 different weapons had been used. That meant there might have been more than one shooter or a very deliberate plan to confuse the evidence. Alex was questioned, but not arrested, at least not yet. He told investigators he loved his family, that someone must have targeted them because of the boat crash or some other hidden grudge. But as police dug deeper, they began uncovering something much darker. Financial records, missing money, and strange insurance dealings began to surface. Whispers spread through the small town that Alex wasn't just grieving, he might have had reasons to hide the truth. And then, in a twist that shocked everyone, just a few months after the murders, Alex Murdaugh himself called 911 again. This time, he claimed he had been shot in the head while changing a tire on the side of a rural road. The news broke instantly. Surviving member of the Murdaugh family attacked. But the story didn't add up. The so-called shooting turned out to be something else entirely. Something that made investigators realize they were dealing with a tangled web of lies and deception that went far beyond one family tragedy. As the truth began to unravel, Alex's picture-perfect world, his career, his wealth, and his family name would crumble in front of the entire nation. But how deep did the lies go? And what really happened on that quiet June night in Moselle? The answers would expose a world of secrets that even the most powerful man couldn't hide forever. The morning after the murders, the small town of Islandton was buzzing. News trucks, reporters, and curious locals gathered near the Murdaugh family estate. Everyone wanted to know the same thing. Who could possibly want to hurt one of the most powerful families in South Carolina? At first, the idea that Alex Murdaugh could be involved seemed unthinkable. He was a husband, a father, and a respected lawyer. The Murdaugh name had been trusted for a century. But as investigators looked closer, cracks began to appear in the perfect image Alex had built for himself. Detectives noticed that his story changed in small but important ways. He said he had gone to visit his mother that night, but the timing didn't make sense. His cell phone records didn't match what he told police. And later, video evidence from Paul's own phone would completely destroy Alex's alibi. Before that discovery, however, the investigation took a strange turn. In September 2021, just 3 months after the murders, Alex Murdaugh called 911 again. He told the operator he had been shot in the head while changing a tire on a lonely country road. His voice was weak and scared. The news spread across the country. Many believed it was another attempt to silence a member of the Murdaugh family. But when police started investigating, the story began to fall apart. Alex's wound was only a graze, and the supposed attacker was quickly found. It turned out to be Curtis Edward Smith, a man Alex knew well, not a stranger. Within days, the shocking truth came out. Alex had arranged his own shooting. He had asked Curtis to shoot him so that his surviving son, Buster, could collect a $10 million life insurance payout. Alex had planned his own death, but survived. This revelation was like a bomb going off. It changed everything. The man who claimed to be the victim of a family tragedy was now involved in a twisted plan of his own. Police began to wonder, if he could stage his own shooting, what else could he be hiding?
Soon, investigators discovered the answer. Alex Murdaugh was deeply in debt. He had been secretly stealing money from his law firm and from clients for years, millions of dollars. He took settlement funds meant for accident victims, funneled them through fake accounts, and used the money to pay his personal bills and keep up his wealthy lifestyle. When the law firm confronted him, Alex resigned in disgrace. The same day, his staged shooting happened, as if it were part of a desperate attempt to cover up everything before it came out. The story was getting darker by the day. People who once respected the Murdaugh name now whispered about corruption and greed. The local community that had once feared them now wanted justice. And as pressure built, more questions rose to the surface, especially about other mysterious deaths linked to the family. Reporters began digging into old cases involving the Murdaughs. One name came up again and again: Gloria Satterfield, the Murdaugh family's longtime housekeeper. In 2018, she had supposedly fallen down the stairs at Moselle and later died from her injuries. Alex told her sons he would help them get a settlement from his insurance company, but they never saw a dime. The money had been paid, but Alex kept it for himself. That was only one of several cases that hinted at a pattern of deceit. Then in late 2021, investigators made a key discovery: a video on Paul Murdaugh's phone recorded just minutes before the murders. The video showed Paul at the family dog kennels, talking casually to his mother, Maggie. In the background, a man's voice could be heard, a voice that friends and family instantly recognized as Alex Murdaugh's. This was huge. Alex had told police he hadn't been anywhere near the kennels that night, but the video proved he was there just before the murders happened. Now, the walls were closing in. Alex was no longer just the grieving father and husband. He was the main suspect in one of the most shocking family crimes in modern U.S. history. Investigators built their case piece by piece: the lies, the missing money, the staged shooting, and finally, the cell phone data that placed him right where his wife and son were killed. Still, Alex denied everything. He insisted he loved his family and had nothing to do with their deaths. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. In July 2022, after more than a year of investigation, Alex Murdaugh was charged with 2 counts of murder for the deaths of Maggie and Paul.
The country watched in disbelief. How could a man who had everything, wealth, power, and reputation, end up accused of killing his own family? When the trial began in early 2023, the courtroom was packed. Journalists, cameras, and locals filled every seat. The prosecution said Alex had killed his wife and son to gain sympathy and distract from his financial crimes. They painted him as a man cornered by his own lies. But Alex's defense fought back hard. They said there was no direct evidence linking him to the murders. No fingerprints, no eyewitnesses, no weapon recovered. Alex himself took the stand, something few defendants dared to do. He looked straight at the jury and said, "I didn't hurt my wife and I didn't hurt my son." The nation was divided. Some believed him. Others saw through the tears and thought it was another act in a long play of deception. As the trial neared its end, both sides made their final arguments. The jury listened carefully. For 6 weeks, they had heard every detail, from the family's power to the secrets Alex kept hidden for years. Then came the moment of truth. On March 2, 2023, the jury returned with their verdict. The courtroom fell silent. The 4-person stood, holding the piece of paper that would decide Alex's fate. Guilty. Alex Murdaugh was found guilty on all counts for the murders of his wife Maggie and his son Paul. He stood there, silent, as the judge read the sentence. 2 life terms in prison, no chance of parole. The Murdaugh dynasty, once untouchable, had finally fallen. But even as he was led away, Alex continued to say he was innocent. His lawyers promised to appeal. And still, new investigations began into his past, into missing funds, suspicious deaths, and the people his lies had hurt. It seemed that the Murdaugh story was far from over, because every time the world thought it knew the full truth, another secret came crawling out of the shadows. The courtroom was silent as Alex Murdaugh was led away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and the man who once stood as a symbol of Southern power now wore a prison jumpsuit. The Murdaugh dynasty had fallen. But for many people, the story didn't feel finished. Outside the courthouse, people gathered to talk about what had just happened. Some cried, some were angry, and others simply shook their heads in disbelief. How did it all come to this? For years, the Murdaughs had been seen as untouchable. They had friends in every courtroom, every police office, and every corner of South Carolina's Low Country. Their family name was printed on buildings, law offices, and historical records. But behind that power was a trail of lies, greed, and heartbreak. As Alex sat in prison awaiting transfer to a state facility, investigators continued to pull at the threads he had left behind. Every document, every bank account, every case file connected to him was re-examined. And what they found revealed just how deep the deception went. Alex had stolen from dozens of clients, many of them poor or injured people, who trusted him with their cases. He had created fake bank accounts to hide the money. He had borrowed against life insurance policies. He even took funds meant for the family of his dead housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield, leaving them with nothing. It wasn't just a crime, it was a pattern of betrayal. As this information spread, more victims came forward. They described how Alex had smiled, promised to help, and then quietly taken what was theirs. To the world, he had been a respected lawyer. In reality, he was drowning in lies he could no longer control. Meanwhile, new investigations were opening into other mysterious deaths connected to the family. One of the most discussed was Stephen Smith, a 19-year-old found dead on a rural road in 2015. His death had been ruled a hit and run, but now, with the Murdaugh name under scrutiny, state police reopened the case. Many locals believed the Murdaugh family had information that had never been revealed. And then there was Gloria, the housekeeper who had served the family for years. Her son still didn't know exactly what happened that day in 2018 when she fell at the Moselle estate. Her case, too, was reopened. The once proud Murdaugh name now appeared in news headlines for all the wrong reasons. Talk shows, podcasts, and documentaries began telling their own versions of the story. Everyone wanted to understand how a respected legal family could fall apart in such a public and tragic way. But even from behind bars, Alex Murdaugh wasn't done talking.
In interviews and letters, he continued to insist that he didn't kill Maggie and Paul. He admitted to lying about money, stealing from clients, and staging his own shooting, but not murder. He said he was a man destroyed by addiction, not evil. Some people believed he was trying to rewrite history, to clean his image for what little reputation he had left. Others thought he couldn't face the truth of what he had done. In early 2024, Alex filed an appeal, claiming he hadn't received a fair trial. His legal team argued that new evidence and phone records could change everything. The public watched closely, wondering if more secrets were about to come out. But by then, most people had already made up their minds. To them, the Murdaugh case was no longer just about one man. It was a story about power and corruption, about what happens when influence and privilege go unchecked for too long. The low country of South Carolina, once quiet and proud, was forever changed. The Murdaugh family's red brick law office no longer carried the same respect. The Moselle estate, once a place of comfort and hunting trips, had become a haunting reminder of all that was lost. Neighbors said the land felt heavy now, quiet in a way that made your skin crawl. Some claimed they couldn't even drive past it without remembering the blue police lights flashing through the night. But the Murdaugh saga didn't just end in South Carolina. It became a national lesson about trust, greed, and the hidden cracks behind wealth and status. It showed how even the most powerful families can fall, and how lies, no matter how well hidden, always rise to the surface. Years from now, people will still remember this case, not just because of the tragedy, but because it revealed something deeper about human nature, about how far people will go to protect an image even when everything around them is falling apart. In his final court statement, Alex said through tears, "I would never hurt my wife or my son." The judge looked at him quietly and with a heavy voice replied, "You can convince yourself of that, but the evidence says otherwise." Those words echoed through the courtroom, a chilling reminder that truth doesn't bend, even for the powerful. Today, Alex Murdaugh sits in a maximum security prison in South Carolina, serving 2 life sentences with no chance of release. His law license is gone, his fortune vanished, and his family legacy destroyed. The story that began with power and respect ended in shame and loss. But for the people who followed every twist and turn, for those who watched the trial, read the headlines, and saw a dynasty crumble, one question still lingers. Was this the end of the Murdaugh story, or just another chapter waiting to be uncovered? Because in the world of true crime, Sometimes, the fall of a dynasty is only the beginning of what's yet to come. Months had passed since Alex Murdaugh was sentenced, but the echoes of his trial still rippled through South Carolina. The Low Country had become more than a backdrop. It was now a living reminder of what unchecked power could create, and how even the most respected families could collapse under the weight of their own lives. Documentaries, podcasts, and YouTube channels picked apart every detail of the Murdaugh saga. People debated theories, motives, and evidence late into the night. Everyone seemed to have an opinion, yet few could truly comprehend the full depth of what had unfolded. For the first time in decades, the Murdaugh name no longer inspired fear or admiration. It brought questions, judgment, and disbelief. The law office that once stood as a monument of success had been shut down. Its letters, once etched proudly on the building, were now faded and chipped. Even the streets that bore silent witness to the family's influence had changed.
But while the outside world moved on, inside the walls of McCormick Correctional Institution, Alex Murdaugh faced a different kind of reality. His days were long and quiet, filled with reflection and regret. He still received letters, some filled with hate, others with pity, but most went unanswered. Fellow inmates occasionally recognized his name from the news. Some whispered about him with curiosity, others avoided him altogether. In the hierarchy of prison life, Alex was both infamous and forgotten. A man who had once held power over judges and juries, now waiting in line for lunch like everyone else. At night, he often stared at the cracked ceiling of his cell, replaying the same moments in his mind. The day of the shootings, the trial, the verdict. He said he wanted to find peace, but peace had become a luxury he could no longer afford. Outside those walls, survivors of his schemes continued rebuilding their lives. Former clients finally received portions of their stolen settlements. Though no amount of money could erase the betrayal, families like Gloria Satterfield's finally saw justice, yet the pain of being deceived by someone they trusted still lingered. Investigations into other suspicious deaths connected to the Murdaugh family continued quietly. Law enforcement refused to close the files. New evidence occasionally emerged: old phone data, financial records, witness statements, but nothing that could rewrite what had already happened. Still, in Hampton County, locals whispered that the story wasn't over. There were too many secrets, too many unanswered questions. Why had certain investigations been buried for years? Who had helped Alex cover up his financial crimes? And were there others who had benefited from his corruption? In 2025, a small production crew returned to the Low Country to film a follow-up documentary. They interviewed residents, attorneys, and investigators. One local man, an older fisherman who had lived there his whole life, summed it up best. The Murdaughs thought they ran this place, but this land don't belong to no one. It remembers everything that happens here, and one day, it all comes back. The Moselle estate, once filled with laughter and hunting dogs, now stood abandoned, quiet, overgrown, and eerie. The once pristine house had become a symbol of downfall. Some locals claimed they saw lights flickering inside at night, though the property had long been vacated. Tourists occasionally stopped on the roadside to take pictures, whispering about the place where it all happened. For them, it was just another crime scene to visit. For the community, it was a scar that would never truly heal. And as the years went by, the Murdaugh name became a cautionary tale told in classrooms, newsrooms, and dinner tables across America. A story of greed, deception, and the cost of living above the law. In one of his final public letters, Alex wrote, "I wish I could take back every wrong decision I ever made. I wish I could tell my wife and son I'm sorry, but wishing doesn't change the truth." Those words, handwritten and shaky, became the last anyone heard from him. He stopped speaking to the media, stopped writing letters, and faded into silence.
The world, however, didn't stop watching. The Murdaugh story, what began as a local tragedy, had become one of the most shocking tales of privilege and downfall in American history. It wasn't just about one family. It was about the power of secrets, the illusion of control, and the inevitable moment when truth breaks through every lie. And so, the curtain closed on the Southern Dynasty that once believed it could not fall. The Murdaugh name, once written in gold, would forever be remembered in the shadows of America's true crime history. If you found this real-life story as shocking as we did, don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe for more true crime documentaries based on real U.S. events. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next case we uncover. Every story here is real, every fact verified, and every truth revealed. This is True Crime, where real events speak louder than fiction.